So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's School of the Word in the Belgium J Chapel. And to those who are listening remotely, a warm greeting to you as well. And however we come to prayer today in the chapel, wherever our minds are at, let's stop to greet the Lord and to hear the greeting of Jesus again. Tonight, as we have entered this chapel, as we spoke to the first person whom we see in the house, that behind the smiles, faces, words of the people we saw, it is God who greets us again. Hello, you. I'm so glad you're here again. And in this week, as we continue to deepen on the theme of the month, Hearts of Fire, Feet on the Move, we continue on this theme of mission. And the guidelines from last week from Karen invited us to pray and enter deeper to bring others to meet mercy. Mercy that is the beating heart of the gospel. And what stayed with me from the guidelines was Karen's story of the confession of the man on his deathbed. And the image of that small little crack and how it was enough for God's mercy to flow. And in this week, especially in the wake of the news of the escalating Israel-Hamas war, this mission of mercy seems even more so urgent now. I was reading on Monday a Times article written by Yuval Noah Harari, the Israeli historian, who wrote and addressed an article to the world to ask those who are outside of the conflict to save the space for peace, for many people caught in the midst of the pain. And I share this line from his article that really struck me when he says, we deposit this peaceful space with you because we cannot hold it right now. And when I read that and in this context, it made me ponder again on this paragraph from Pope Francis's message for World Mission Sunday this year with a lot of sense of poignancy. Pope Francis wrote that today, as then, the risen Lord remains close to his missionary disciples and walks beside them, particularly when they feel disoriented, discouraged, fearful of the mystery of iniquity that surrounds them and seeks to overwhelm them. And he encourages us let us not allow ourselves to be robbed of hope. Thinking about the situation in the world and reading this, I was asking Lord, Lord, for all the people who have given their lives, who are giving their lives now in the distribution of the aid, for all who had been working on the many peace treaties that happened and seemed so close to fruition before this war happened, for the people who are overwhelmed by the violence and horrors, for the people closer to home, the people whom we know who face many different complex issues, who are deep in their pain, in the overwhelmingness of all this, how to not allow ourselves to be robbed of hope. And Pope Francis continued, to remind, and it's as if it was an answer, that the Lord is greater than all our problems. Above all, if we encounter them in our mission of proclaiming the gospel. And to remind us that at the end of the day, this mission is His, and we are nothing more than His humble co-workers. And so this mission of holding space for peace, of living out mercy, is not lived out by our own strength and power. And this week, tonight, we are invited to ponder and reflect on how each of us are invited to depend on God in the mission. What does it mean to live each day as we work and put all our effort in whatever mission we understand, whatever way we understood that we can be a mission, depending on God. Tonight, I share some points from my prayer with St. John's account of the multiplication of the loaves, which fed 5,000. And the passage is from John chapter 6, verses 1 to 14. It begins, with this scene of Jesus crossing the Sea of Galilee and so many people following him. This multitude of people following Jesus. And just simply imagining and contemplating, using my senses, you can imagine how much hunger, how much crowd, so many things that are happening. And that hunger can be overwhelming. So many things. What struck me at very first was verse 5 and 6, when Jesus initiated that conversation with Philip. That when he asked, and what I said in the beginning, he asked Philip the question of where can we buy some bread for these people to eat? Saying this, well, he himself knew exactly what he was going to do. And pondering on that point, what struck me then, that depending on God in this mission, looks like this. It's living, recognizing anew that it is God himself who takes the lead in every phase and season of the mission that he has asked and entrusted to each one of us. That we are not and never alone in the mission of sharing the good news. And then ultimately, this mission belongs to Jesus. In the Gospel, and when I read it again, I was struck, and I invite you to read again how the events of the story progress. For each stage, each new action begins with a word or action of Jesus. Jesus says, make them sit down. And after that, it is Jesus who takes the loaves, breaks the bread, says the blessing. When everyone has finished eating, again it is Jesus the one who instructs the collection of the leftovers. Scene after scene, the place markers in this account of the multiplication are the words and actions of Jesus. And how often do we remember then that God is the one leading, doing the work, and that we are his disciples working alongside him? How often do we know that we can count on him to show us in all situations how we are asked to follow him in this mission? So often in the bustle of activities, the many appointments, the day-to-day running, in the whirlwind of maybe our mental thoughts, our to-dos, our backlogs, the worries and anxieties of simply daily life, we run through all these things, drawing upon the resources that we have whole and our own human will. But living the mission with a dependency on God looks like living each day, each action we take, with the faith that God is always with us. The reason Lord is here, always with us, and that this mission is not ours but God. That it was He who opened the mission that we have now with His very first question. And it is He who knows what He will do and how it will happen. And so we can count on Him. To quote the lyrics of Maureen Tan, Five Loaves and Two Fishes, we can count on Him and we can cry out to Him with the trust of a child, the Father. Never losing hope, knowing that God is the very first person to whom we can bring our troubles, our problem to. To tell Him, Lord, I don't know how to continue. And to hear Him respond, but I know, I see, and I'm willing to show you. And it is that in the Gospels, after Jesus initiated the conversation with Philip and Andrew, and we see, Philip and Andrew's response. Philip being the thinker, calculating the money and thinking, oh, this is not enough. Resources are limited. Andrew being the logistics guy and really thinking about how to split. There's only this amount of, we found something, but maybe it's not enough to meet their need. They were sharing their tentativeness about this possibility of the task that had been asked of them then. And it struck me very much to see, after they had shared, the response of Jesus, because it seems like a total about turn. He asked them to make the people lie down on the ground. And this phrase caught my attention then, because the disciples followed and took action in spite of the effort they took. So having experience for you today, I was imagining, and looking at the people and thinking of the overnight vigil, how much effort it must have taken to coordinate this project, to ask everyone to simply sit on the ground first. 5,000 people in a time with no handphone, no nothing, no communication, how to work together. That was quite a pretty massive operation. Thinking about the disciples, maybe they had to run around, or maybe when all were seated, maybe they realized they were quite far from Jesus and they really couldn't see what was happening. And to rely on whoever was nearby to tell them what to do, what would be next. To go back and ask again. And yet, in the quiet, unwritten, and unseen moments, I saw that actually they were responding to that initiative with so much gratefulness. Although things didn't seem clear, although maybe they didn't really understand what was happening. And maybe they had their questions, how can we feed so many people? Or really, is this food enough for us all? Enough to feed the need? And like these disciples, perhaps we all experience moments like this. Living moments of our mission, realizing that mission is not a journey that is free from challenge, or a journey that means having perfect clarity and knowing what's going to happen next in every moment. Sometimes, as we are knee in this process, sometimes we feel that sense of discouragement when it seems like challenges are insurmountable, and we really don't understand. Other times, when we taste the depth of our limitations, there's this sense of frustration, of cannot already. I cannot be patient with this person anymore. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't have anything inside of me to choose your way, God, to stay faithful to commitments, to accept the responsibility, this new thing that you have given to me. I don't have enough to meet this person where he or she is. The whole space. And yet, when we look at the Gospels again, when we see the response of the disciples, it struck me so much. It was that silent yes and that shows what depending on God in our mission looks like. That silent, simple, and quiet courage to live and take those acts of love. Maybe not spoken, but lived out from what we understood God has. Every time faithfully to the end, until all were fed. Pondering on this, it helped me remind me of a quote that struck me from the recent Petrobras of Sister Monica. And it was the phrase that described the symbol of the jar that we see here in the chapel tonight. Of how that jar of clay represents the consecrated missionaries who give their whole life to Jesus for all people in the faith that nothing is wasted. And it was that line, in the faith that nothing is wasted. Not all of us are called to be consecrated missionaries, to give our whole life in the way the missionaries do. But we are very clear that all of us have been called and asked by God to love Him and to love our neighbor. And depending on God, looks like that in our own way, being courageous to choose to give of ourselves, of our time, of our talents, to take the act, to own what is given to us, to accept the responsibility that we have, the work that we have been asked for, not for nobody, not for ourselves only, but for very real people in our lives that God has asked us to love so concretely. And being depending on God is giving that, making that often day and day, believing from Him that nothing is wasted when we stay faithful, when we try again every day, knowing that big things are made with small steps, small acts of love. And so we live that in our ordinary lives, be with your children, your parents, with colleagues, with ourselves. Day by day, we faithfully give. And Pope Francis kind of summarizes that when he says, not every day of our lives is serene and unclouded. But let us never forget the words of the Lord Jesus to His friends, that in the world you will have tribulations, but be courageous. I have conquered the world. So let us never forget the words that the Lord Jesus has said to His friends.